How Britain's useless night fighters became the Luftwaffe's worst nightmare. September 1941. A lone RAF Havoc hunts through pitch-black skies over Essex. Radar pings, contact. But it's not a bomber. It's a German night fighter, their best. Cannons roar, wing explodes into flames, 3 parachutes bloom against the stars. And then the trigger finger goes still. What happened next changed everything we thought we knew about the Night War. But here's the thing, nobody tells you about 1940. Britain was getting absolutely slaughtered in the dark, like not even close. German bombers owned the night skies, and the RAF. They were swinging blind in a pitch-black closet. And the proof? It's worse than you think. The Blitz killed 43,000 civilians. Entire neighbourhoods vaporised while families slept. And Britain's night fighters? They were shooting down maybe 1 bomber for every 100 sorties. 1. Pilots flew these clunky Defiant biplanes, turret guns pointing backward like some medieval nightmare, groping through darkness with nothing but eyeballs and hope. They called it cat's eye flying. Propaganda said pilots ate carrots for night vision. Reality. They were flying coffins. Picture this. You're strapped into a cramped cockpit, engine roaring so loud you can feel it in your teeth, and you're supposed to find a black bomber in a black sky over a blacked-out country. No lights anywhere, no moon half the time, just you and the darkness and the knowledge that somewhere up here, German Heinkels and Dorniers are dropping high explosives on sleeping families. And you've got nothing. No instruments that matter. No way to see them until they're literally close enough to touch. Most nights pilots would land, having seen exactly nothing. Meanwhile, London burned. The frustration was unbearable. Pilots would scramble 3, 4, 5 times a night, chasing reports from ground observers who'd heard engines overhead. By the time the fighter reached the area, the bomber was long gone, already dropping its payload 10 miles away. It was like trying to catch smoke with your bare hands. Some pilots never even saw a German aircraft their entire first year of flying night patrols. They'd circle in darkness, burning fuel, praying for moonlight or a lucky visual contact that almost never came. Ground controllers tried everything. Searchlight batteries would sweep the sky, hoping to illuminate targets for fighters to chase. But the beams just blinded the pilots, ruining their night vision for crucial minutes. Anti-aircraft guns filled the air with flak, which was just as dangerous to British fighters as German bombers. The whole system was chaos. Different services not communicating, no coordination, no effective way to guide fighters to targets even when you knew exactly where the bombers were. But something was brewing in secret hangar labs that would flip this nightmare inside out. See, by late 1940, British boffins cracked airborne radar, these bulky AI sets that could see enemy planes through clouds, fog, total darkness. Douglas Havocs got fitted with these electronic eyes and twin Merlin engines that turned them from blind stumbles into genuine predators. The catch? Nobody believed it would work. Even the pilots called them useless at first. Too heavy, too complicated. Radar screens fuzzing out randomly. The early AI radar sets were absolute disasters. Picture a glowing green screen the size of a dinner plate, covered in ghost returns and static. Every storm cloud looked like a bomber. Every flock of birds became a raid. The equipment weighed hundreds of pounds, which meant the planes flew like pregnant ducks. And the learning curve, brutal. Radar operators had to interpret these dancing blips while the pilot threw the aircraft around the sky, both of them knowing that one mistake meant either missing the enemy entirely or flying straight into the ground because you were staring at a screen instead of watching your altitude. The first operational radar sets had a range of maybe 3 miles on a good day. Compare that to modern systems that can track targets 100 miles away. These primitive sets would lose contact if you turned too sharply. They'd fritz out if moisture got into the electronics. They required constant adjustment, constant interpretation, constant prayer that what you were seeing was actually real and not another phantom return. Wing Commander Gordon Raphael didn't look like the guy who'd proved them all wrong. Quiet Canadian engineer type, soft-spoken, methodical. The kind of guy who'd check his aircraft 3 times before takeoff and still worry he'd missed something. And he was still healing burns across his hands and face from when his Havoc ditched in flames 6 months earlier. The kind of injuries that should have grounded him permanently. But Raphael had this thing about him. this calm intensity that made even veteran pilots shut up and listen when he talked about radar intercepts. He'd been an engineer in civilian life, worked on radio systems in Toronto before the war. That background gave him an almost intuitive understanding of how the radar worked, what the returns meant, how to coax useful information from the static-filled chaos on that green screen. While other pilots treated the radar operator as just another crew member, Raphael understood they were the most important person in the aircraft. Without Nat Addison's eyes on that scope, they were just another blind fighter groping through darkness, until one Canadian pilot proved everyone dead wrong. Gordon Raphael didn't look like a killer, quiet engineer, soft-spoken Canadian, but put him in that cockpit with a radar scope? The Luftwaffe started calling him something else entirely. Wing Commander Gordon "Raffy" Raphael was exactly the guy you'd never pick for this job. 26, baby-faced, still healing from burns when his Havoc ditched in flames months earlier. His radar operator, Nat Addison? Wiry Englishman whose voice crackled through cockpit static like a lifeline. These two spent weeks learning to think as one organism. Nat's eyes on the radar, Raphael's hands on the controls, both their lives depending on split-second coordination in pitch darkness. They'd practice intercepts during daylight first, chasing friendly aircraft to learn the radar signatures, understanding how the returns changed based on range and angle. Then twilight intercepts, then gradually darker conditions until they were operating in complete blackness. The trust required was insane. Raphael had to believe completely that when Nat said "turn left now," there was actually something there and not empty sky or, worse, a mountainside they were about to slam into. Nat, for his part, lived in constant fear of giving wrong information. One bad heading and he'd kill them both. One misread return and they'd waste fuel chasing ghosts while real bombers slipped through to hit cities. The pressure ground down weaker crews, some radar operators cracked, started seeing contacts that weren't there, or missing real ones because they'd lost confidence in their ability to read the scope. And their first real kill almost killed them instead. September 16th, 1941. They scramble from Hunsdon Airfield as dusk bleeds into black. The air tastes like aviation fuel and autumn rain. Ground crew wave them off with red torches, the only light for miles. Nat hunches over the glowing radar scope, green phosphor pings dancing like fireflies. They patrol over Essex, the channel a black void below, waiting for something, anything to show up on that flickering screen. Hours pass. Nothing. The cold seeps through their flight suits, even with the heaters running. Raphael's hands cramp on the controls. Nat's eyes water from staring at the scope. This is night fighting. 90% boredom, 10% absolute terror. The Havoc's engines drone on, hypnotic, dangerous. Pilots have fallen asleep on long patrols, woken up seconds before hitting the water. You fight the cold, the fatigue, the mind-numbing tedium of flying circles in darkness, all while staying alert enough to react instantly when contact finally comes. The fuel gauge creeps lower, another hour and they'll have to turn back, another patrol with nothing to show for it. Raphael considers calling it, heading home, when Nat suddenly stiffens. "Contact, skipper, bearing 270. His voice cuts through the static, sharp and electric. Raphael's entire body snaps alert, fatigue evaporating like it was never there. Throttles forward, banking hard west. The Merlin engines scream as the Havoc claws through the darkness. "Range 4 miles, 3.5. He's turning north." Nat's voice stays calm, but Raphael can hear the tension underneath. This is it. Real contact, not a ghost return. "Come right 10 degrees, steady. 3 miles and closing." The radar only gives bearing and rough distance, no altitude. They could be chasing something 5,000 feet above them or 5,000 feet below. Raphael keeps the Havoc level, trusting the target is roughly at their altitude, adjusting climb rate based on Nat's tone when he reports range changes. The target? A Junkers Ju-88, except this one isn't a lumbering bomber, it's a night fighter, their version of Raphael. Hunter versus Hunter at 15,000 feet, where one mistake means frozen oblivion. And that's when the rule book went out the window. This is the part that separates night fighting from daylight dogfights. You're hunting by radar blips and instrument panels, closing to knife fight range before you even see the enemy. Raphael creeps closer, trusting Nat's directions completely. 150 yards, 120, 100... The German pilot has no idea they're there, no idea death is closing from behind at 300 miles per hour. Radar was Britain's secret weapon, and in late 1941, the Luftwaffe still didn't believe the RAF had it working. German intelligence reports from this period are fascinating. They documented British radar stations on the coast, knew about the chain home system that detected incoming raids, but they consistently dismissed the possibility of effective airborne radar. Too heavy, too complex, too prone to failure. German scientists were working on their own versions but hadn't cracked it yet. So Luftwaffe crews flew, assuming they were invisible at night. The British fighters were still groping blind. That assumption killed thousands of German airmen. The shock when they realized British fighters could track them through total darkness was devastating to morale. Suddenly, nowhere was safe. Clouds didn't hide you. Darkness didn't protect you. You could be flying along thinking you were alone, and then tracers would rip through your cockpit from behind. No warning, no chance to evade. Raphael finally sees it. Darker black against black, a mechanical shadow. He creeps to 100 yards, so close he can see rivets, panel lines, the faint glow from the German cockpit, close enough to read the aircraft numbers if there was any light. His finger tightens on the firing button. 4 20mm cannons, 8 machine guns, all pointing at that Ju-88's wing route. One squeeze and it's over. He fires, the night explodes. Tracers arc out like comets, walking up the Germans' fuselage. The concussion from his own cannons rocks the havoc, spent shell casings rattling through the fuselage. The Ju-88's wing shreds like paper, erupts in orange flames that light up the entire sky bright as day for one terrible second. Pieces of aircraft tumble past, a chunk of wing, something that might be a propeller blade, debris glowing red hot. The German plane pitches violently left, one wing completely gone, falling into a death spiral. Standard protocol: keep firing until it's scrap metal tumbling into the channel. Make absolutely sure it can never threaten Britain again. Raphael's finger is still on the button. He can pour more rounds into that dying aircraft, guarantee the kill, eliminate any chance of the crew surviving to fly again. But Raphael's thumb lifts off the trigger, and everything changes. 3 parachutes bloom against the stars, white silk drifting toward black water. And Raphael circles like a guardian angel over men who were trying to kill him 30 seconds ago. Here's what nobody prepared Raphael for: watching 3 human beings bail out of a disintegrating plane into freezing darkness. Hatches blow open, visible in the firelight from the burning wreckage. Figures tumble into 200 mph wind, dark specks against darker sky. For a second, they're in free fall, limbs flailing, trying to orient themselves in the spinning chaos. Then parachutes deploy in silent grace, white mushrooms catching moonlight, 3 fragile lives suspended in the void. One German navigator clutches a photo of his family, wife, 2 children, pressed against his chest inside his flight suit. He'd looked at it before takeoff, like he always did, kissed it like he always did. Now he's dangling beneath silk, watching his aircraft spin down toward the channel in flames, wondering if he'll live long enough to see those faces again. Another mouths a prayer his mother taught him when he was 6 years old. Words he hasn't thought about in years, suddenly the only thing in his mind. The third, the pilot, watches his aircraft. His beautiful Ju-88 that he'd flown for 8 months, that had brought him home through flak and fighters and bad weather, spiral toward the channel and thinks about all the letters he never wrote, all the things he meant to say. And Raphael's got a choice every night, fighter dreads. His hands are still on the controls. His guns still have ammunition. Those parachutes are perfect targets, drifting slow and helpless. 3 quick bursts and the problem disappears forever. 3 fewer Luftwaffe crewmen who might bomb London tomorrow, might shoot down his squadron mates next week, might kill British civilians before this war ends. The math is simple and brutal. Trained aircrews are valuable. Germany's losing pilots faster than training schools can replace them. Every experienced crew that makes it back is a strategic asset against Britain. Everyone you eliminate is one less threat. Military textbooks are clear on this point. You don't let enemy soldiers escape just because combat's over. You press every advantage. War isn't a gentleman's sport. Standard operating procedure was brutal. Shoot the parachutes. Sounds barbaric until you remember these are the guys who just bombed your cities who will fly again tomorrow if they live. Until you remember that German night fighters were hunting British bomber crews the exact same way and they weren't showing mercy. Some RAF pilots did it. Some Luftwaffe pilots definitely did it. There are documented cases on both sides, parachutes shredded by machine gun fire, men dead before they hit the water, bodies recovered with bullet holes through the canopy, and the harness and the man. Nobody officially sanctioned it, but nobody explicitly forbade it either. The rules of war were murky on parachuting combatants. Were they still enemies, or were they out of action? Could you legally shoot them? International conventions said wounded combatants should be spared, but were men bailing out considered wounded? The Geneva Conventions were clearer about soldiers who'd surrendered. But these men hadn't surrendered. They'd just ejected from dying aircraft and were floating toward the sea where they might be rescued and fly again. But Raphael, he guides his wingman to mark the splashdown coordinates, circles low while British rescue boats race out from Clacton. He can see the Germans hit the water, see the white parachutes collapse and tangle around them in the waves. The channel in September is cold enough to kill in 20 minutes. The water temperature is maybe 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Survivable, but barely. Men have died in less time from cold shock, from hypothermia shutting down their organs, from simply giving up because the cold saps your will to keep fighting. He keeps circling, keeping the position fixed, radiating the coordinates again and again until he sees the rescue boat's spotlight cutting through the darkness. It's a small civilian boat pressed into service, crewed by fishermen from Clacton who volunteered to patrol for downed airmen. They're risking their own lives out here. German bombers sometimes strafe rescue boats, seeing them as legitimate targets since they're saving enemy pilots. 3 Germans hauled aboard, shivering, wide-eyed, coughing up seawater. One stammers, "Danke. No shoot." Through chattering teeth, can't believe the British fighter didn't finish them. A British sailor, kid from Liverpool, maybe 19, who lost his own brother in the Blitz, drapes a blanket over his shoulders without a word. The moral calculus is too complicated. These men just tried to kill British people. But they're also freezing and helpless and done fighting for tonight at least. Another crewman offers a cigarette. The Germans huddle together looking up at the sky where Raphael's Havoc still circles, red and green navigation lights blinking against the stars. They can't understand why they're alive. Their training said British pilots were ruthless, that the RAF showed no mercy. But here they are, wrapped in British blankets, smoking British cigarettes, watching their executioner make sure they're rescued safely. But here's the part that'll twist your gut. Back at base, over weak tea in the dim mess hall, Raphael tells Nat, they fought like devils but lived like us. Not policy, not orders, just instinct. See, the night war stripped away all the propaganda, no formation flying, no wingmen, just you and the darkness and a radar blip that turns into a cockpit full of terrified faces. When you're that close enough to see them scrambling for the escape hatch, they stop being the enemy. They become somebody's son trying not to drown in the channel. Raphael sits there with his tea going cold, hands still shaking from adrenaline, trying to explain something he doesn't fully understand himself. Nat just nods, doesn't push. They've been flying together long enough that Nat knows when Raphael needs to talk and when he needs silence. The other pilots in the mess don't ask questions either. Some of them have made the same choice, some haven't. Nobody judges because everyone knows they might face it tomorrow night. The squadron commander files the report. 1 Ju-88 destroyed, 3 enemy crew rescued. No mention of whether Raphael could have prevented that rescue. No commendation for restraint, no censure for letting enemies live. Just the facts. Enemy aircraft destroyed, mission accomplished. What happened after combat ended isn't really the RAF's concern, as long as intelligence got a chance to interrogate the prisoners. And this wasn't some isolated moment of softness, because by 1944, these useless night fighters had racked up over 600 Luftwaffe kills. But the real story? It's what they didn't shoot that mattered most. Let's talk about the transformation nobody saw coming. Early 1940, RAF night fighters were a punchline, shooting down 1 bomber per 100 missions. Radar screens glitching out, pilots literally guessing which direction to turn. The Germans flew over Britain like they owned the place, dropping bombs with impunity, laughing at British attempts to stop them. Göring publicly mocked the RAF's night defences, said they might as well be shooting at stars for all the good it did. German bomber crews grew complacent, flying predictable routes, not bothering with evasive maneuvers because there was no threat. By 1944, they'd obliterated over 600 German aircraft and shattered Luftwaffe morale so badly that crews refused night missions. German bomber pilots started requesting transfers to the Eastern Front. Facing Russian flak and fighters seemed safer than British night skies. Think about that. They'd rather face Soviet anti-aircraft guns, MiG fighters and brutal winter conditions than fly over Britain at night. Luftwaffe veterans from 1941 literally couldn't believe the transformation. They went from hunting over Britain unopposed to every night sortie becoming a coin flip between mission completion and death. But the numbers only tell half the story. The technology evolved like something out of science fiction. Mosquito night fighters replaced clunky Havocs, twin Merlins pushing 400 pound, radar so precise it could track a single bomber through storm clouds from 5 miles away. These planes were made of wood, laminated plywood and balsa, basically flying furniture. But they were faster than almost anything Germany had, and they were quiet. German crews called them ghosts because you'd never hear them coming until the cannons opened up. The Mosquito was a revolutionary design. Britain was desperate for aircraft but short on aluminum and steel, so they built a high-performance fighter from wood, using furniture makers and carpenters to construct them. The Germans thought it was a joke when intelligence first reported wooden British fighters. Then, those wooden fighters started destroying everything in the night sky. The Mosquito could outrun most German fighters, outclimb them, outmaneuver them and carried enough firepower to disintegrate a bomber with one burst. Pilots like Raphael became legends, racking up double-digit kills. Some night fighter aces got 20-30 victories. John Cunningham, another RAF legend, got 20 kills and became so famous they built the cat's eye propaganda around him, told the public he ate carrots to see in the dark, when really he was using top-secret radar that the government didn't want Germans knowing about. Bob Braham got 29 kills before being shot down and captured. These weren't lucky amateurs anymore. They were precision hunters with technological superiority and years of experience reading radar returns in pitch darkness. The training program evolved too. New pilots spent months learning radar intercepts before ever flying operational missions. They practiced in simulators, chased training aircraft, studied successful intercepts frame by frame. By 1943, the RAF was graduating night fighter crews who could execute perfect intercepts on their first operational patrol. The learning curve that had taken Raphael and Nat months of dangerous trial and error was compressed into structured training that saved lives and increased effectiveness. German bomber crews started calling night missions death sentences. Before takeoff, guys would write last letters home, leave personal effects with ground crew, make dark jokes about not coming back. The psychological toll was devastating. Imagine climbing into your aircraft knowing that somewhere in the darkness above Britain, radar-equipped hunters are waiting. You can't see them, can't hear them, can't evade what you don't know is there. Your only warning is the first burst of cannon fire, and by then it's usually too late. Luftwaffe supply lines collapsed because nothing could fly at night. Hitler's entire Eastern Front strategy depended on aerial logistics. Supplies flown to surrounded units, wounded evacuated, reinforcements transported. Suddenly, impossible. Transport planes carrying supplies to surrounded German units, shot down. Bombers trying to hit British factories, shot down. Even reconnaissance flights became suicide missions. Germany's ability to conduct night operations collapsed completely. But here's the contradiction that defines this whole war. These machines were designed for industrial-scale killing, and they delivered Hamburg firestorms, Dresden raids, thousands dead. The Mosquito night fighters that showed such precision hunting bombers, they also flew intruder missions over Germany, shooting up trains, strafing airfields, dropping bombs on cities. The same pilots who'd circle bailouts to guide rescues also pressed attacks that turned entire German cities into crematoriums. Yet pilots like Raphael kept finding these pockets of humanity. Not every time, not even most times, but enough that captured German airmen would whisper about honourable RAF pilots who let them live. It's the same guys who'd shoot down 10 bombers in a week, then circle a bailout to guide rescue boats. The same night fighter squadrons that racked up hundreds of kills also had these unwritten rules. Don't shoot parachutes unless they shoot first. Don't strafe lifeboats. Give them a chance once the combat's over. Which brings us to the question nobody wants to ask. Here's the part that keeps me up at night. Raphael's restraint wasn't weakness. It was maybe the hardest decision a pilot could make. Because every German he let parachute safely, that guy might bomb London again, might kill British families, might shoot down Raphael's squadron mates next week. This wasn't some theoretical ethical debate. These were real consequences that Raphael had to live with, and Raphael knew it. They all did. Post-war interviews reveal the psychological toll. Night fighter pilots developed this weird split consciousness. Absolute focus during the kill, then overwhelming humanity the second they saw the crew bail out. Some pilots reported nightmares about faces in parachutes, white silk against black sky, wondering if those men made it home or drowned or flew again and killed more people. British POW interrogations show those 3 Germans Raphael spared flew 20 more missions before war's end, 20 chances to kill. The navigator flew 12 more sorties before his plane was shot down again over Hamburg in 1943. This time he didn't survive. The pilot made it to late 1943 when his Ju-88 was destroyed by another Mosquito over the Ruhr. The gunner survived until May 1945, surrendered when Germany collapsed, went home to his wife and daughters. So was Raphael wrong? That's the trap question. Because this isn't about right or wrong. It's about what kind of person survives a war like this without losing themselves completely. Raphael killed dozens. His final tally was 14 confirmed kills, 42 men, minimum dead because of his skill. But in specific moments when combat cleared and he saw human beings dangling from silk, he remembered they were more than targets because Germany trained pilots to shoot parachutes without hesitation. And by 1944, when their own crews were bailing out over burning German cities, karma arrived with vengeance. Fast forward to post-war. Raphael, grey-haired, toasts Nat Addison at a 1963 reunion. Across the room, one of those Germans he spared, now a grandfather, who tracked Raphael down to say thank you. They share a drink. Don't mention the part where they were trying to kill each other. The German brings photos of his grandchildren, says he wouldn't exist to see them if not for Raphael's pause that September night, and that moment reveals everything. Britain's night fighter campaign decimated the Luftwaffe, over 1,000 aircraft destroyed. The technology went from useless radar experiments to AI-guided missiles modern jets still use. But the human element, that separated victory from becoming the thing you were fighting. Every generation faces its own night skies. Moments where we're hunting shadows, where the enemy is invisible until they're suddenly right there. And in those split seconds, we become who we really are. Raphael had every justification to keep firing. War, duty, revenge for 43,000 dead civilians. But he saw the parachutes and remembered these were men, not machines. Sons, fathers, brothers falling toward cold water. The night war claimed thousands of lives on both sides. It was brutal, industrial, merciless. But inside those machines were people who still had the capacity to choose. Not always, not even usually. But sometimes they remembered their humanity and acted on it, even when every rational calculation said not to. So, what would you do when your finger's on the trigger and you finally see the face behind the enemy? When the combat ends and you're left with 3 parachutes drifting toward black water and 20 seconds to decide if you're a soldier following orders or a human being making a choice, there's no right answer. Raphael made his choice. Other pilots made different ones. War doesn't offer clean moral victories. It offers impossible choices and then makes you live with the consequences. But here's what we know. Raphael died in 2003, 88 years old, having lived a full life. The gunner he spared saw his daughters grow up, had grandchildren, died peacefully in 1987. The night fighters were called useless until they weren't. They became the Luftwaffe's nightmare through technology and skill, but they stayed human through choices like Raphael's, through moments of restraint nobody ordered. That's the story statistics don't capture. Not just how many bombers were destroyed, but how many parachutes were spared. Drop a comment. Did Raphael make the right call? And hit subscribe for more untold war stories that change how you see history.